And so if we have this serious attitude towards dating, then we want to be pretty sure about someone before we enter into the relationship. And so what do we want to think about? What do we want to look for in a potential partner? So specifically to those of you who are single here, what do we look for a partner? Well, I'm going to drop something pretty big on you guys. It's not about looks. Even the world acknowledges this. This is something that, obviously. But what are the things that the world values? Personality? Well, it goes deeper than that. Compatibility? Important, but deeper than that. Those things are secondary, way secondary. I didn't know exactly what my dad was going to go with his presentation, but it actually works pretty well with this. First of all, they have to be a Christian. That should go without saying, but clearly it doesn't. And so let me just say a few words on this. And Dad, you did mention this, but don't even consider dating someone if they're not a Christian. And this can be very difficult because we can very genuinely fall in love with someone who is not a Christian. And when those kinds of emotions are in play, we know how strong our hearts can be, how powerful that emotion can be. And so what do? We'll start to think of all kinds of excuses or reasons. This is explicit in Scripture, by the way, in 2 Corinthians 6. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? If we fall in love with someone who's not a Christian, or we meet someone and we really hit it off with them, and we think that we want to get together with them and they could be good for us, then we'll start to think of all kinds of excuses to date that person, even though the Scripture says explicitly not to. We'll say that, maybe if I start dating them, they get close with me, we spend time together, the Lord will use that, and He'll change their hearts, and they'll become a Christian, and everything will be perfect. Well, the Lord might do that, but He's not obligated to do that. Don't just assume that the Lord is going to change somebody's heart. Like I said, He could, but that's not our attitude. We're not told to date whoever we want and the Lord could change their hearts. Or don't go into it saying, well, you know what? I'll date this person for a year or for 2 years, and if the Lord still hasn't changed them, then I'll break up with them and move on to someone else. That's, like I said, you need to plan on marrying someone before you're dating them, so that fails right away. Don't assume that God is going to change their hearts. What's going to end up happening? A Christian being in a relationship with a non-Christian, that's not God putting some sort of restrictions on us to keep us from being happy. That is totally for our good, because these relationships can only end poorly. What'll happen if the relationship is going to work is that you, the Christian, are going to have to compromise your faith a lot. Why? Well, if you're consistently living out your Christian faith, if you're living for the Lord, and I mean really committed to Christ, to the Christian life, if your unbelieving partner's heart isn't softened and changed, their heart's going to be hardened and they'll just leave. They'll get out of there. And so if you want to make the relationship work, then you're going to be the one who has to start making sacrifices. You're going to have to, put a little off there, not be so hard-lined on that, don't talk about that. Maybe only go to church a few times. Maybe you start making little sacrifices along the line, and your relationship with Christ suffers. Why? So your relationship with an unbeliever can maybe flourish somewhat. So don't even consider it. And don't even entertain the ideas in your mind. If you feel yourself starting to fall for somebody who's an unbeliever, if you're starting to get interested, don't even play it out or entertain it. Just put that away. Pray that the Lord would take those thoughts and those feelings away. And if the Lord pleases to and He wants to change that person's heart, and He does, and after that you want to get together with that person, go ahead. But unless or until that happens, no, don't date somebody who's not a Christian. So beyond that then, what should we be looking for in a partner? Once they meet that prerequisite, we want them to have a basic understanding of the biblical rules of male and female. And so we just had a long discussion on that, those passages from Ephesians and 1 Peter. Not going to go all the way back into those. And so clearly that's a pretty high standard. We're not looking for somebody who meets that standard perfectly, of course. But you want somebody who shows those tendencies, somebody who they have at least an understanding and they tend toward those things. So if he's a man, does he take responsibility? Is he eager to lead? Does he serve other people in his life? Does he show those sorts of qualities? And for women, are they willing to submit? Are they kind of repulsed by the idea of submission like so many are? Are they, I keep looking at my mom, making me laugh. Yes, are they willing to submit? Are they willing to be led? Are they eager to learn and to be led? What you want to really look for then is a trajectory. Are they on that path toward fulfilling those roles? Do they understand where they fall short? Or do they think that, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, I got this figured out? And where they do fall short, are they concerned about it? Or do they just say, hey, that's just who I am, not going to change, it is what it is? Are they concerned with growing in the Lord? I think it's also important to consider their prayer and their devotional life. Like I said, you want to get to know these people well. You don't want to date someone you just met a few weeks ago. You need to know somebody well before you start dating them. So consider, are they committed to their relationship with the Lord? Are they deep in their faith? Do they spend time in the Word? Do they spend time in prayer? Do they go to church? What's their attitude toward that? Go to church with them. Do those kinds of things together. Read the Word with them before you start dating, before you get into that relationship. Establish that your relationship first in the Lord, and then take it to the next level as far as romance and that sort of thing goes. As I mentioned, you want to make sure, are they, like I said, that trajectory of sanctification, are they concerned about personal holiness? Are they concerned with growing in their obedience to the Lord? Basically, you can summarize this. Are they a real, true, solid Christian? You want to look for somebody who is firm and deep in their faith and someone who's committed, not someone who's just, I'm a Christian and just kind of pretty loosely using that term of being a Christian, and they're not really serious about their faith. You want to look for somebody who is very serious about it and who you can grow with in the Lord. I think there are other things to consider that kind of fall secondary. You can think about like doctrinal standings. I'm not saying this necessarily is make or break, but you want to talk about, do they believe in infant baptism, or are they believers only baptism? Because that's something that you're going to have to face down the line if you get married to that person and have kids. It's something to think about. I'm not saying that an Arminian can't date a Calvinist, but it's something to consider. It's definitely worth looking into. Not that those have to be deal breakers. I think also another important thing that you might want to do, and don't think that like personality and compatibility don't play a part in this at all. I mean, they do. I'm not saying that like if you find somebody who's a good, solid Christian and you get along and they're eligible, then you have to date that person or there's something wrong with you. I mean, if you don't get along with them too well, or if you don't mesh with them, that's perfectly okay to not be with them. But those things, whether you like the same kind of food or movies or activities or whatever, I mean, those things are absolutely secondary. First, they have to be a solid Christian, and then after that are all the regular things we think about and put on our dating profiles, if you've ever done that. I think you also want to, as much as you can, if possible, get to know their family and get to know their church family. Spend that sort of time with them. Like I said, all this before you start dating them. I think for so many of us, we have that kind of worldly idea of casual dating, where first you start dating, and then as you move forward in the relationship, then you get to know their family, and you get to know their friends, and you get to know their relationship to the Lord better. But I think the more biblical idea of this is to do that stuff first. Because like I said, you need to be seriously considering marrying that person before you date them. And so you should, again, I know it's not always possible, but you should try to get to know their families, get to know their church, get to know them more deeply. And I think an important thing too, oftentimes, if we're thinking about dating somebody, we'll pray about that. That's good. We should do that. But I think it would be a good idea to talk to that person whom you're considering and pray with them about it. Approach that person and say, I believe that this may be something that I'm interested in, or some place where the Lord is leading me to this kind of relationship with you, and you talk to them and you pray about it together. I think that's kind of like can you imagine like a more firm, solid ground to begin a relationship? So we're not looking for that, just kind of casually date around, see what you like, but know them first and know them in the Lord first.